And so were you going to school when you were here in Clearwater? You said, let's say you're 9 years old. From 9 to 13, were you going to school? Mm-hmm. Public school, private school?
Private school. They were all Scientology schools. They were all sponsored by Applied Scholastics. So they used the study tech, and then those schools would pay 10% to Applied Scholastics International, which would then give the money to the church.
Okay, good. So let's spend just a few minutes talking about going to one of these private Scientology schools that is supposed to have nothing to do really with Scientology.
Zero.
And to a I mean, they don't literally teach Scientology, so I'll give them that.
Yeah.
Right? And that's fine. It's not. There's nothing wrong with necessarily having. Well, I'll let you answer the question. Going to the Scientology private school? You and I know it's a Scientology private school, even though they're not marketed that way. What do you learn at the school that could be ascribed to Scientology, and what do you learn in the school that's just totally normal?
I mean, you learn the 3 R's. You learn science and physics. You can't, you know, that's all straightforward. They're really straightforward schools, but then there's this undertone where everyone doesn't talk about it, but it's true. Everyone there has parents in Scientology. 99% of all these schools are just all Scientology.
What about the people who work at the school?
They're all Scientologists.
Okay.
I mean, maybe occasionally there's a non-Scientologist, and they always feel weird, and they're always looked at until they start doing courses. They teach study tech, which is fine enough, and it tells you to look up your words you don't understand, demonstrate things out that you don't get, and if something's too tough, you go back to what was easy until you get it well enough till you can move on. I mean, it's not too crazy, but you'll always see like a history of man lying around, or the Dianetics picture book at Delphi or Clearwater Academy, or know, Light School, Renaissance Academy, all these different places. Right. So you'll see Scientology literature just strewn about, and then when you go into the admin office with the actual staff of the school, there's OT plaques in the ethics officer, the principal's office. There's superpower donation, contributor statuses, symbols.
What about in a normal public school? Let's say you get in trouble, you get sent to the principal's office, you do detention. Were there any component of Scientology ethics and justice that were used in the schools? Do you remember?
Oh yeah, I mean, it was all Scientology justice, right? It was conditioned, so it started as low as, I believe it's enemy or confusion, whatever. It's at the bottom is a confusion. It goes.
So
up.
they used Scientology ethics conditions on the students.
Oh yeah, 100%. So they use the term overt and withhold. So an overt is a transgression, and withhold is a transgression you have not told, and then they go into the whole mechanism of you commit an overt, you get a motivator, which is a transgression against yourself. It's more or less scientific karma.
Okay. Now there's no question that is getting into the Scientology philosophy, right? 100%. I mean, it'd be like in Catholic school if you got in trouble and you had to do confession and say Hail Marys. I mean, that's Catholicism.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
and also what happens in these schools, the church will know about. I mean, if you're doing something bad enough, the church knows everything those kids are doing.
Right, if someone writes a report on you, it's not just
if you get a KR, a knowledge report, right, which is just a missive that someone writes against you on something that was, quote, out ethics, then if it was egregious or bad enough, then the Church of Scientology will have it and put it into a folder with your name on it. And I've had a folder since I was 4 or 5, so I've got a lot of folders.
Right, right. Did they actually require students to write up their OWs?
Yeah, they did. Yeah, so what it was if you had continuously gotten in trouble, if you kept coming in late, if you couldn't get along with the teacher or the student, whatever you could do that's unbecoming of a student, you did it enough, and yeah, you write up your OWs. I think I did my first OW write-up when I was 9.
Right, okay. All right,
and then I had to like time, place, form, an event. Right. What I did, I poked Johnny in the eye. And
this is one of the things that I say as a result of Going Clear, but it's not. Going Clear is not the only place where this has been pointed out. That, the difference between going into a Catholic church and doing confession with a priest, and sitting down with a Scientology auditor and doing a confessional, is that the priest isn't writing down the exact details, time, place, form, and event of everything you're telling him you've ever done bad, and keeping it in a file in archives forever
with notes.
So. And again, it's one thing if it's being done in a church. Maybe you can say, even in a Scientology church, you could say it's ecclesiastical and whatnot. But here we're talking about in a school where students who aren't even Scientologists, most of these students, just because their parents are Scientologists doesn't mean they're Scientologists, are writing down basically everything that they've done bad.
Yeah, yeah, and the parents are all on board with this. I mean, there's no parent that disagrees. If the parent disagrees, the parent gets pushed in the direction of getting kicked out of Scientology. No one wants to go that route. No one disagrees with the church. So when the church, or I mean, what will happen in a typical Scientology family is when a kid's doing something wrong at home or in school, it's, I'm going to write a chit or I'm going to write a KR on you, and it's going to go into your folder, right? And you're like, you learn to fear this folder as a kid. You're like, oh hell, like that thing is growing, right?
You can say fuck on this channel.
Fuck that. It's really, this folder grows and grows no matter what you do, and people leverage the folder against you. I'm going to write a KR on you, and then you go, oh shit.
Yeah. Okay, so we got off onto that train of thought because we were talking about whether kids are actually expected to write down OWs in school, and we covered that. Right. So they are.
But then they use that folder against you. Like when I was
in the school or in the church?
At the church.
Okay.
At the school, they're actually rather humane about it. I'm going to be honest. If I can't, I'm not just going to throw all those schools under the bus. Although the problem with those schools, the biggest problem I had was like when I was 13 going to Back to Basics, which was run by Mallory and Joan Pascoe.
Is that the name of the school, Back to Basics?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Or it turned into Keystone High. CMO would come to the school, Commodore Messenger Officer recruiters, and I would be in class, and Joan would come in and go, Nick, there are CMO members here. They would like to speak with you outside. Right. And then they would look all excited, like, CMO's here to talk to you. It was like the Cardinals came down to speak to little Johnny about joining the the monastery. And so I would lose out on hours of school on any day they wanted to come and try to get me to join the Sea Org. And I was 13. So here I am, my mom's paying $800 a month to go to this private school, and the principal is so excited to take me away from schooling, to go outside and sit there for 3 or 4 hours while recruiters told me about how many people are dying on psychiatric drugs, about how wars and dictators and psychiatrists run the planet. They showed me a scripture of a transcription of an auditing session between L. Ron Hubbard and another guy, where the guy was running out an experience with Martians, and he said, the Martians are worried that Scientology is getting too close to helping man, and they want to, and they're showing me this at like 13 to scare me into joining the Sea Org, into joining the Sea Org. And that's what I was doing in school at 13.
Right.
That's my problem. My other problem was that at 13 at Flag, they had this Sea Org slideshow. It was like 27 minutes or something. I think I remember like the exact how long it was, because my friend Kara Karnofsky, who used to be a schoolmate of mine, ended up for 5 years being the Sea Org slideshow recruitment officer, which meant she just stood outside this door 16 hours a day and got people to see a slideshow.
Right. So her statistic would have been number of people who see this movie.
So I always felt bad for her, so I must have seen that thing like 500 times. I'm not even kidding. But it was Jason Begay, the star of Chicago PD, right? He was narrating the whole thing. He narrated maybe like 20 minutes of it. I think he even mentioned he did it in there. But like, it starts out with pictures of tanks and like emaciated and dismembered children and starving kids in Africa and just a nuclear bomb explosion. And it goes like, and Jason Begay's voice comes in with these dark ass lights in this room, and he goes, "We live in a world gone mad, with pain and strife for the lot of humankind." And then you're just like, as a kid, you're like 12 years old, you're like, it's like Ludovico. And then you come out there like shaking, and then the Sea Org member, but the end is all like lights and happy music and like the Trans-Siberian Orchestra, like dun, 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 and it's like the Sea Org, right? Like, and then LRH is like a voiceover of LRH with the backup violins, and he's like, "We are the only hope in all the broad universe." He goes, "I have borne this burden too long. I share it with you now.
Right.
Won't you join me?" And then you walk out and there's Sea Org members to recruit you for 8 fucking hours.
Well, I'll tell you,
and that happens every day, man. I've been around the block, and I thought it helped, so I was taking the courses, but at the cost of being heavily recruited. After events, recruiters would grab you by the hand, and I kid you not, like forcefully move you and shove you into chairs or shove you into dark rooms with Sea Org recruiters after these big events. And then they would have all this material on statistics of how many people take psychiatric drugs, how many people commit suicide each day, how many people, kill other people, how many people are sold in like the sex trade every year. And it would say the Sea Org is the only group to handle. So they would show you all these crazy things, right? And they'd show you pictures of just fucked up shit. And then they would show you the LRH policies on why the Sea Org is the only thing which can cure it. So you sit there in this state of catatonia, and then they literally in a short recruit cycle is like 3 hours. 3 hours with 6 people around you is like light.
And at an age of, we're talking 13 or younger.
13 is when it started. And then when I would go on course, Daniel Sanchez would even let recruiters in the course room. And it was even against LRH policy to be recruited during course. I was like, well, and then, but I spoke up and I got sent to ethics.
Right.
And then they reamed me.
So, okay, here's a question. From the recruitment pitch that they're making, right? Mm-hmm. They present this horrible situation of planet Earth and what everyone's, destiny is going to be is doom and destruction. How are they explaining why joining the Sea Org is the only way to prevent that from happening?
Well, because it's inculcated into you at a very young age that Scientology is the only answer. There are no other answers. I mean, LRH laughs about Jesus and Christianity. He laughs about confessionals in the Catholic Church. He laughs about, he throws Freud and Kant and Hegel and every psychiatrist or psychologist that ever came out of Leipzig, Germany, just under the bus. It's just they were all... Now, he gives kudos to them, at least he did in the beginning of Science to Survival, 50,000 years of thinking men. But it was almost like, hey, guys, thanks for, trying to figure out all this. I finally did, but here's a little thumbs up for trying. And it was just... So it made Scientologists think like, what idiots. I mean, we really have to treat it. So Scientologists, this is what makes Scientologists so narcissistic.
And so why joining the Sea Org? Why not just go out and be a field auditor?
Well, I was just painting a picture like, so you think Scientology is the only answer. Why not just be a field auditor? Why not be someone that just goes and like disseminates or promulgates Scientology out there to the public, but you're not clergy? Because LRH writes this thing in Keeping Scientology #1, which is like, he describes where we're at as a brief breath in eternity, right? Like we have a very slim chance of surviving. It may be too late to save the universe. And he writes things in their lines such as like, you're either with us or against us. We'd rather have you dead than incapable. Turn that wandering eye into a dedicated glare. He calls anyone who's not into Scientology a namby-pamby panty-waist dilettante. Like, he creates this extremist idea that like we could be dead. And then in all his lectures he'll say the only reason the Earth is still spinning basically is because Scientology has done what it's done. But it would have ended due to nuclear war had we not existed. Right. And maybe we have shown up to late. So you're constantly in this state of thinking that the world's going to fucking end.
Right.
So that's why. Right, and then they go, we need you 18 hours a day, 7 days a week, 364 and a half days a year.
Right.
You can have half a day off.
And you're not being recruited by like some 50 or 60-year-old dude. You're being recruited by some good-looking girls or some guys your own age who you think are awesome.
And your
people,
friends.
Right?
You're being recruited by your friends.
Right.
Yeah, because I mean, all my friends were decently active and constructive people. Well,
when you say being recruited by your friends, your friends had to already be recruited.
Yeah.
So
what they would do, and this was just common knowledge because I eventually ended up joining staff for a few years, more like slave labor. But when they're in their behind the closed meetings, they want opinion leaders. They want people who can influence other people. So what they do is they recruit the biggest and baddest or most influential, and then they take that person everywhere, and they take him to all of his friends, and they go, look. So that's how they got me. They took my best friend at the time, Spencer Bradham, and they got him recruited, and then he came over to my house, and I was so heartbroken. This was a kid I played soccer with my whole life. Grew up playing classical piano with him, and we were just like, that was my dude. And they had also had before that, I mean, at some point, every one of my friends was in the Sea Org, right? And they got me to join. I mean, I left after like 3 weeks because...
Right. And even though, my experience with Sea Org recruitment was a little different because I was already on regular staff.
Yeah.
I was able to see this kind of things that you're talking about, right? Because I was a regular staff member training at Flag in Clearwater, so the same place where you were.
Right.
And my friends were Sea Org members, and they couldn't recruit me, but I could see what they were doing. And so it was just like what you're talking about. Let's say recruit one of the more popular guys in school, or girls, and then that person, their job is now to go recruit their friends.
Right.
How cool it is, how awesome it is.
Right.
You're essentially an emancipated minor for all intents and purposes.
Right. And you would be. And there was 15-year-olds getting married in the Sea Org, right?
Yeah.
To 40-year-olds. Because they were emancipated and it was legal once they were married. It was fucking disgusting.
Right.
And I know a dozen guys I grew up with who all fucked minors.
So there is... So there is a certain cachet.
I don't hang out with I don't like any of those guys. I knew them, and they've all fucked minors. That's my other problem with Scientology.
So at that young age, there is a certain cachet to being able to, if you join the Sea Org, you gain a lot of freedoms in a way, because kids in this society don't have really any freedoms.
Oh yeah, when you're 15, they all get the mouth of a sailor. A lot of them pick up smoking.
Right. They're essentially adults.
They're essentially adults.
Doesn't view children as children.
But once they join, they're adults.
So let's touch on this. How does a recruiter go about, like if you're a young person and you're being recruited,
right?
Usually your objections are along the lines of either I want to do my sports, I want to do my acting, I want to hang out with my friends, I want to be an astronaut, whatever it is. How does the recruiter convince you that those things are not worth pursuing or are not important?
Well, they convince you. I mean, they don't convince you. They use LRH policy to convince you. This isn't your only life. This is a meat body, right? And this is all. And then Earth is a prison planet, okay? And there's just things in it make to look nice. So art, friends, family. Family's nothing. Family is nothing more. And Charles Mitchell actually told me. He looked at me and he said, "Nick, your mother is nothing more than a zygote that created from an egg that you were bred from. That is your only." I mean, he told me that when I was 13. Right. You know, I went back to my mom and I said, "So he said basically, all you were was an egg. Like we got nothing." Like you just hear the craziest stuff, right? And LRH says that you've had more lifetimes than all the sand on the beach, and so you think that it's all worthless anyway. Life is worthless. That's what a Sea Org member paints a picture as. So they would tell me. I mean, I remember Alan Javonin, who is like an OT fucking 94.
Alan Juvenon.
Yeah.
I remember that person.
Yeah, just a weirdo, honestly. Like the guy was the biggest sober stoner I've ever met in my life. But they would tell me, like, and Charles Mitchell would be, "You don't need to get your Eagle Scout, Nick. LRH got his Eagle Scout, and he paved the way." He did
it so you wouldn't have to.
I kid you not. And I was looking and I'm like, I don't even know what to fucking say to that. Like, you don't need to have sex, Nick. Other people have. And they loved it. So it's okay if you don't go have sex. And I'm like, yeah.
Well, I'll tell you, one of the things that is so ironic about schools being run by Scientology, and I realize they're not literally run by Scientology, but what's ironic about Scientologists running schools is that there is this idea that you've lived a billion, trillion lifetimes before. There's nothing you don't know how to do. You just forgot it. There's nothing. There's no job you've never. There's no job you've never held. There's, you've been king. You've been king 100 times over. You've been president 100 times over. And so the whole idea that you have to get educated is looked almost down upon because it implies you're not already educated.
It's silly.
And really, the purpose that the schools serve is just to get someone up to the age where they can read and write and not be an idiot. You obviously have to be literate to study Scientology. It's
about 10% of all kids in Scientology schools end up joining the Sea Org.
Right.
Because Sea Org members are constantly coming to the schools, waiting outside after school for specific children who they're working with. The principals are in cahoots because the principals are all usually on OT7 or something like that, and so they give you a nod and go, "Good luck, bud."
Right.
And they go, "I hate to see you go, but you're off to a good cause." And then as a kid, I must have had this. It must have happened a dozen times, or a dozen or two times, where kids would show up, like be like, "Okay, that's it. Everyone pencils down. We have an announcement." And a kid, like I can think right now, like this kid Rafferty Pendry, I went to school with, or not Rafferty, his brother, David Pendry. He came to the front of the fucking class and he said, "I joined the Sea Org. It's my purpose. It's the right thing." He was 14. He might still be in, but we all just sat there.
Yeah, he is. He's still in the Sea Org.
Is it David Pendry?
Yeah, he's actually I think his name is David. Yeah, he's the cramming officer at the advanced org.
Yeah, so good for him. But my point is, at their schools, they would end class to announce this grand occurrence, and it was at Delphi, at Renaissance Academy, it was at Clearwater Academy, it was wherever, and it was such a.
You do have to be a Scientologist in good standing to work at a school that's part of ABLE, the Association for Better Living and Education, which is one of the branches of the Church of Scientology International. And maybe there's nothing controversial about that. Maybe private schools can just do what they want, and they can, maybe that's not a big deal. But it's definitely true that the people who run these schools, they are, for the most part, people who are on OT7, which means they are the most answerable to the Church of Scientology. Right?
I mean, like marionettes to the nth degree.
Right. And so the irony of having Sea Org members who are either high school dropouts or middle school dropouts going into a Scientology-run high school to recruit those people not to go to the school and to instead join the Sea Org, at the behest of the Scientologists who are running the school, is quite ironic.